Welcome back to the Faygoluvers Podcast. I am here with Farris, the Juggalawyer. Brother, how the hell are you?
Hey, man. What's up, Roscoe? Thanks for having me, man. It's fucking awesome. It's good to be on the Faygoluvers Podcast. You know, I check Faygoluvers religiously every single day, so it's nice to be part of the action here, man.
Dope, man. We really appreciate that. Trust me when I say that. To start, I wanted to ask, what is currently happening with the FBI's labeling of Juggalos as a gang?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, I only get to do like a little update once a year at the gathering at the ICP seminar, and you know, there's usually a lot of other things going on and a lot of other news at the ICP seminars. Definitely appreciate the questions. Basically, obviously, we sued the FBI once in 2012, and that was to get their reasoning for why they labeled us a gang. They mainly provided us with a bunch of Googled articles of like local police departments that were quoted in their local paper saying, oh yeah, there was this vandalism or there was this assault and Juggalo did it, there's this new gang in town. There's a bunch of like stuff that a middle schooler could basically research on the internet. It was really weird. So that led us to realize they didn't have a good reason,
Right.
Other than just joining the bandwagon of some random cops that didn't know what they were talking about. We decided to do the big lawsuit, which is we filed in January 2014. We were very lucky to have the ACLU join on with us for that lawsuit. That gave us a lot of firepower. Howard Hertz, Miller Canfield, the other lawyers that are also on the case, along with myself. And what happened was, the case was basically dismissed on a motion early on by the judge in Detroit, federal court in Detroit, Judge Cleland. And basically what he said was, all this discrimination that's going on is not really being done by the FBI themselves. Yeah, they put you on their list, but it's the Sacramento police that's bothering the plaintiff, Brandon Bradley. It's the Royal Oak police that's bothering ICP. It's the Tennessee State Troopers that were bothering Mark Parsons. The FBI themselves hasn't been the ones fucking the Juggalos, even though all those agencies individually, including the U.S. Army, said, we're doing this because of the gang label that the FBI put you guys on. So basically, we obviously didn't agree with that decision, so we appealed it. Appealed it to the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. That was a huge argument down in Cincinnati. It's like one step under the Supreme Court. It was a huge argument down in Cincinnati. We kicked their ass. We won unanimously on the appeal. So what happens when you get an appeal early on in a case and you overrule a judge, unfortunately, and this is throughout any legal system in the country basically, you just get kicked right back down to that same court and that same judge to finish your case out. Because we haven't even had depositions, we haven't had a trial, we haven't had anything. We just keep getting thrown out on motions. So we won the appeal. That was really huge. They never put us back on the list for the report since that year. But still, they have also gone out of their way not to say that we're not considered a gang anymore. And obviously, people are still suffering every day. So what happened was, it was really funny. Another motion to dismiss happened at the federal court in Detroit, and the court in Detroit threw the case out again for a similar reason, basically saying the same thing he said last time, also threw in that this is just the FBI's opinion, so you can't sue them for their opinion. They can put whatever they want in this report, and you just can't sue about it, which, again, we didn't agree with, and we thought was BS. This is America. You should be able to do something about anything that affects your rights and affects you legally, and sort of blacklist a whole group of people for no good reason.
Because of your opinion, right?
Yeah, so we appealed again, quickly. That's what's going on right now. We're in the middle of our second appeal at the U.S. Court of Appeals, which again is right under the U.S. Supreme Court, okay? The court right under there. But they agreed with us last time. The law's on our side, the Constitution's on our side. We're hoping that they agree with us again.
Have you ever handled a case like this before?
You know, I handle federal cases. I don't think anybody's handled a case like this before. Like, this is a case of first impression for the court. That's why they don't know exactly what to do with it. There's never been in the history of music anything like this.
Right.
So, no, I've never handled a case exactly like this before. I don't think many people have. But, you know, thankfully, we have a huge team. It's not just me, but it's Howard Hertz and his law firm. It's Miller Canfield. joined in when the ACLU joined in because they partner with the ACLU. ACLU of Michigan rarely ever loses a case. Obviously, they're the biggest civil rights legal group in the country, legendary status. It's a whole bunch of really, really, really smart lawyers on the team and on the case. And unfortunately, it's dragged out now for a few years. Hopefully, justice will be done sooner than later. These federal cases sort of take a long time, and ours has taken an extra long time. Having to do all these appeals just makes it drag out further and further. And the problem is that people are suffering every day, and we're trying to do everything we can to speed up the process. But then again, fighting the government is not an easy task, and for us to still be in the fight at this point says something. It's obvious to anybody with half a brain that we're on the right side here.
Right. Well, what can the Juggalo community do to help out with this?
That's a good question. It's funny, like, ever since we first started the case, like, juggalos would come up to me all the time and be like, hey, man, we want to support the cause. We want to contribute. We want to contribute to the legal fund. We want to, what can we do? ICP made, like, a conscious decision that, they don't want any juggalos having to contribute any money to this if it wasn't necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary. So all I can say is just represent Juggalos in a positive way. Like, the march was like, it blew my mind, man. We obviously had faith, like, especially ICP, like, they had faith. Like, everybody told them, dude, this is going to be a shit show. Juggalos are going to get arrested, and they're going to be wilding out and rioting and getting fucked up in the Capitol and all kinds of shit. It was the opposite, man. We had one of the most peaceful marches of the year, I guess, probably you could say, and we actually dwarfed the Trump rally that was going on. Anybody who's really familiar with Juggalos knows when we need to take something seriously, we need to respect something, like, we're the most respectful people. For the march, a lot of media followed certain Juggalos to the march, but I thought that was really cool because, it's obvious if you just hang out with us that there's no gang activity going on, right? So,
right.
And then down the line, like, there might be more specific stuff you can do, but I think, like, representing, whether it's just locally doing something good for the community or just how you carry yourself, or when you do get the chance to sort of get a megaphone and speak to local media or national media or whatever, just representing the right way. I think that goes a long way to helping us clear our name. That's the main thing right now, and if there's anything more specific, we'll let everybody know.
Dope. Farris, I just want to ask you about the first time you ever actually heard ICP. Can you just tell me about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I grew up in Metro Detroit. ICP was huge in the early 90s and mid-90s, like, here in Metro Detroit, especially in the early 90s. Obviously, the rest of the country, not many parts of the country had heard of them, but they were huge over here. For me personally, I would just go down the street in my neighborhood. There was this really cute girl that lived down the street from me that I always had a crush on. It was like 94, beginning of 94, sometime in 94. Everybody was really into, like, Snoop Dogg at that time. Like, that Doggy Style CD had recently come out, and he was, like, the big thing. I had my Snoop Dogg CD with me, this whole gangster rap thing that was blowing up throughout the country. The girl that lived down the street from me, her older sister came out. I was 12 years old at the time. She came out and she was like, oh, you like that rap? Listen to this. This is straight out of Detroit. These guys are, like, you have to listen to this rap. And she threw on the Ringmaster.
Oh, shit.
And it was like the craziest, wickedest shit I've ever heard in my life. And it was funny because back then, a big thing going on was, like, they just started putting these parental advisory stickers on CDs. And if you go to the local record store, if you were under 16, which I was, you had to have your mom come and buy the CD with you and for you. You know what I mean?
I've done
my
it
mom was
many times.
Yeah, you remember that? My mom was pretty conservative. She wouldn't always be down with it. So it was so funny because I went to the local record store, which they don't have those anymore, but I went to the local record store. They had, like, a whole section of, like, ICP CDs. They had Beverly Kills, they had Ringmaster. I think they were Out of Carnival of Carnage, whatever. It was so underground, there was no parental advisory sticker on it. They would just bring this, I don't know how they did it, but they would just bring the CDs to the store and they would just sell them, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't have to go through national distribution and get that parental advisory bullshit on there. So I could just buy whatever I wanted. So I copped Beverly Kills, I copped Ringmaster. It was the original Ringmaster I'm sure you've seen it, but it was like the gold CD. So the CD itself was gold. It wasn't like that silver normal CD. Obviously, the imprint on top of it was all black with 4 little ringmasters cut out. They were in gold because the CD was in gold. You know, and then I caught Beverly Kills, which I hadn't heard before. And it's funny because when I'd go visit my cousins, like, across town on both sides of Detroit, everybody was listening to ICP. Everybody was, like, drawing, like, the Carnival of Carnage clown. It was, like, a big thing, you know, and it was pretty popular for a few years. And then even into, like, the late 90s, people used to cruise certain streets for girls because you couldn't go online and just be, like, go on Tinder or something. So people would cruise up and down Gratiot on the east side. They would cruise, you know, certain downtown areas on the west side. Especially if you went, like, on the east side or downriver, it was just juggalos everywhere. There was juggalos everywhere. It was crazy, man. It was a scene. That's how I first heard ICP, when I was like 11, 12 years old, just in Metro Detroit. And then the scene really died down here in the early 2000s. I mean, it's still blowing up everywhere else. It's so amazing to see. I'm in my mid-30s. It's amazing to see, like, you go to the gathering, you go to shows, and, like, you see, like, 16, 17, 18-year-old juggalos every year. You know what I mean?
Right.
I hope that we're still going strong.
No, I know what you mean by that. It's like, it's awesome to see new school and old school juggalos.
Yeah, for sure, man, because that's the future right there.
Right. Hi, homie. I read Steve Miller's book, Juggalo, and I just wanted...
Steve Miller's the man.
Steve Miller is the man. Can you tell all the listeners about the first time you actually met Violent J?
Oh, yeah. This is the 100% accurate version of it. It's funny, man. I was always, like, a huge Juggalo, huge ICP fan, like, my whole life. I was just talking to you about the early 90s. So this is, like, fast forward to 2012, okay? I had just gotten married. Me and my wife, Rima, we had a little puppy that we had gotten recently, and there's this outdoor mall. There's not that many outdoor malls here in Michigan, right? So there's this nice outdoor mall called Partridge Creek on the east side, because you can walk your dog at the mall there, right? So we drove out there to walk the dog and walk around and stuff. It's funny because I had always known ICP's lawyers that they used here locally. I'd known a lot of them because they were all successful lawyers. We all kind of knew each other. There were people that I had actually even worked with and partnered with, but I never got the opportunity. Like, the stars never aligned for me to work with them, and I thought that was my best chance. Like, one of their main lawyers named Mark Beginnin back in the mid-2000s was like a good friend of mine, ended up being a partner of mine. They slowly weren't working with him as much when me and him started working together more. So I was like, well, there goes my chance to ever meet ICP, because I just wanted to meet him. Like, I've met him at, like, shows and stuff, but it's different. We're at the outdoor mall. We're walking the dog. We just recently walked in, and I look over at the ATM machine in the middle of the mall. It's Violent J with no paint on, but I immediately knew from the tattoos on his neck and his hand, you know what I mean? Like, it's obviously Violent J. He's with Sugar Slam, his wife, and he had his 2 kids with him, you know, JJ and Ruby. And he just, like, was going up to the ATM machine to get some money. And I turned to Rima and I was like, that's Violent J. And she's like, how do you know? And I'm like, I know. Trust me, I know. Like, I can tell. She's like, yeah, you should go up with him and get a picture. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to hound dog him. Like, it's cool, whatever. We kept walking closer and closer to him, and then I was just like, fuck it, Joe Bruce? And he was like, yeah, hey. And I didn't know, because, like, back in the 90s, I don't know if you remember this, he had a reputation for, like, if you went up to him, like, outside of normal events, he could be an asshole to you sometimes or not. You know what I mean? So I had no idea what to expect. He was the nicest fucking guy in the world. We stopped there, and he just started talking to me, and I was like, hey, man, I've been a juggalo since the early 90s. You probably don't meet too many juggalos that are lawyers. Here's my card. If you ever need anything, I'll do it for free. And he was like, cool, thanks, man. And he took my card. And we're just, like, bullshitting. He's like, the gathering was coming up that year in 2012. It was in a few months or whatever. I'm sitting there talking to him. Ruby and JJ are, like, running around our feet playing with the dog. I think Rima was talking to Sugar Slam. It was surreal, you know, and I was just like, man, in my opinion, you're the best rapper of all time, like, whatever. And he was really cool, and he was like, well, man, there's a lot more to come, you know? He's like, I don't know what to say to that. That's really nice, but there's a lot more to come. I was like, yeah. He's like, are you going to the gathering? And I'm like, well, I'm married now. Like, I probably, I used to go to the gathering a lot back in the day, but I probably can't. I'm definitely not going this year. So he was like, well, man, we got some new CDs coming out, and that's when the Mighty Death Pop was coming out. I'm like, yeah, I know, man. I'm waiting every day for that shit. I don't think he believed me because he saw my cards, pretty successful award-winning attorney around here, and I think he thought what I meant was, like, I was only down back in the day, not more recently. So I'm like, yeah, man, I'm waiting for that Smothered, Covered, and Chunked and all that, all the bonus CDs, and he's like, damn, this guy knows what he's talking about. Right. That was it, man. Oh, I did get the picture because Rima was like, hey, why don't you guys take a picture? He was like, yeah, for sure. He would go to take the picture, and he was like, you want to be in it too? And she was like, no, I'll just take it. And he made a joke. He's like, hell no, she doesn't want to be in it. Took the picture. We went our separate ways, and that was it. I was geeked as hell, obviously. Like, I sent the picture to a couple of my homies, and I was just, like, on cloud nine. And that was it. I thought that was it. That was dope as hell. That was awesome. Like, cool. Right. I got to, like, actually meet him and chill with him for a few, like, outside of a concert situation. I never thought I'd hear from him again. And literally, like, a little over 24 hours later, I get an email from this, like, random email, and it's Violent J. And he was like, hey, man, we want to do something that is probably the biggest thing that we've ever done. It's definitely risky, but we really need a lawyer that knows our music and knows our culture. We'd love to meet with you and talk to you about it. He's like, I don't know if you'd be down with it because of your reputation. Like, I don't want it to hurt you professionally coming out as a juggalo, but this and that. And I was like, dude, I'm totally down. Fuck yeah, I'd love to meet. I was like, what's this about? I had to read it like 3 times, though, because I didn't believe it was him at first, but it was definitely him. We started text messaging after that, called him, and we started text messaging. I was like, so what's it about? And he's like, well, I'll let you know at the meeting. And the gang label had just come out. It wasn't even 6 months that it had been out, because I think it came out in November 2011. I was like, do you want to sue the FBI for the gang thing? And they had, like, no official response at the time about the gang thing. And he was like, very wise. He's like, I'll see you at the meeting. So we set up a meeting. I'm like all geeked. I'm going to psychopathic headquarters. I'll do my legal research and prepare, like, a memorandum and a proposal. And I go over there to talk about it. And I sat down with Violent J and Billy Bill. And I was like, well, yeah, you can sue him about it. It's a violation of free speech. Freedom of association is totally First Amendment. All these different legal avenues. Violent J was like, man, he's like, when it first came out, like, we thought it was funny. And I was like, yeah, me too. I was like, I couldn't believe that we were on the FBI's radar. I didn't know the FBI knew what a juggalo was. Like, I thought it was hilarious. And he was like, yeah, like, we thought it was funny. Like, we didn't know what to think of it. We thought it was actually, like, funny to the point of, like, oh, it's kind of cool, whatever. And I know that there was always some juggalos that thought that way, and then there were some that were pissed from the get-go, which now I understand why. But Violent J schooled me on it. He was like, after shows, juggalos are coming up to me, and they're like, we're getting fucked with by the police in the parking lot. Like, we're driving into the show, and we're getting fucked with for the stickers on our car. I'm on probation, and I'm not allowed to listen to your music or go to your concerts. Like, all this crazy shit. He was like, that's the problem. The police are totally, ever since this FBI thing, the police are cracking down and fucking with juggalos. And he's like, you remember from back in the day, like, there'd be a parking lot party before the show. Those are, like, dying down. Everybody's, like, afraid because police are fucking with them. And, like, being from Michigan, the police are used to juggalos for 25 years. I never really felt it. I never really saw it firsthand, but it was going on in a lot of places. I mean, even in Michigan a little bit, but especially other states, it's going on a lot. That's when we decided to do the announcement at the gathering, and that I'd go to the gathering and interview a bunch of people and get their statements of how the police were fucking with them.
Right.
And little did we know until I sat down there with people, because it was supposed to be for like 2-3 hours after the seminar that I'd take some statements. It was like 2 days straight for 8 hours at a time with like a line out the door and my trailer, which is a little makeshift office in Cave and Rock, of people giving me stories, and it was way worse than what we thought. Like, we thought it was all about the police, but it was Child Protective Services, and it was the military, and it was people's jobs, and, like, schools, and, like, all kinds of shit that we didn't even imagine. This gang thing just spiraled out of control. So,
right, and the shit's still happening right now, too.
Yeah, we still get complaints, man. It sucks because all we can do is just keep on the path that we're on. we can't add more people to the lawsuit because the lawsuit's in process. Even though it's been in process for a few years, this is the process you have to go through. And we even got some indications that the FBI early on would be like, okay, let's just settle this. What do you want? What do you need us to say? Like, we'll compromise on the wording of our statement and we'll fix this, And unfortunately, there's some stubborn people over there, and they don't give a fuck, and they're just fighting us tooth and nail. We're not even suing them for money, man, as you know. All we want is for them to say, we never meant for people to treat juggalos as a gang in general. We never meant for all juggalos to be labeled gang members. That was not our intention. And we even got them to admit that in court. But they also said, we're not on the gang report anymore, but they don't put out a list anymore. And, basically that we're still on the internal list that all law enforcement has access to, and that we're still considered a gang, even though they stopped publishing it.
Right.
Crazy. It's 2017. This is what we're fighting about.
And hopefully it doesn't last too much longer, homie.
I hope not, man. And you never know. I mean, ICP always said, you never know what happens in court, but we're going to keep fighting till we can't fight no more. For the one time in history, the media's on our side, the Constitution's on our side, so we should win. But we just got to wait and see how it plays out.
All right, man. One final question, and this is a question I ask every episode of the podcast. You're stranded on a deserted island. You got a Discman. You got 3 CDs. What 3 CDs do you got?
All right. See, and I wasn't even ready for it because I'm not going to lie. I go to Faygoluvers every day, but I rarely listen to the podcast. But I have been going through now and checking out how fresh it was. I started listening to the Vinny the ICP Kid one today. But that's easy for me, though. It's Ringmaster, it's Riddlebox, and Slim Shady LP.
Wow. You know what? Riddlebox and Slim Shady LP have been pretty popular picks on the podcast.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's basically what I'd be bumping.
Dope. Hi, homie. Is there any final words, Farris, that you want to let the listeners know, the fans know, before we take off here?
Anything is possible with this Juggalo stuff. It's blossomed into something much bigger than it is. I'm literally living a Juggalo's dream to be working with ICP and Psychopathic and be able to help out other Juggalos with this. It's a big community, but it's also so tight-knit and it's also small in a sense, small town feeling that everybody knows each other. So you never know, man. You just come out to the gathering or come out to a show and you never know what the fuck is going to happen. Go up to other Juggalos when you see them around town. You just never know how things can sort of work themselves out in our world, man. I never expected it. I'm very as far as work goes, I never expected to be known as a Juggalo player, you know what I mean? But it's awesome, man. It really is. And it's something that I think anybody, as long as you get off your ass and you participate, I think it can happen to anybody because I see it every year at shows and at the gathering. I see people's dreams come true one way or another. I think we're all sort of riding this wave together. Fucking come out and keep riding it.
Oh, yeah, well said. Thanks so much, Farris.
No doubt. Take care, Oscar. Thanks, brother.